When my husband announced at our wedding reception that his mother was getting everything, he forgot I had spent 3 years building the evidence in my attorney's folder. The microphone feedback cut through the string quartet at exactly 8:22 p.m. My husband Marcus had tapped his champagne glass 3 times, the specific rhythm of a man who has been waiting for this moment, and the room had gone quiet with the particular attentiveness of 200 people who believe they are about to hear a toast. I was standing at the edge of the dance floor in my wedding dress, which I had paid for myself because that is the kind of detail that tells you everything about a marriage before the marriage has technically started. The dress was ivory. Simple, the kind of dress chosen by someone who cares more about the day being real than about the day being photographed. I was holding a glass of sparkling water because I had not been able to eat since that morning, and I had decided that being sober for whatever was coming next was more important than being comfortable. I did not know what was coming next. I want to be precise about that. I did not know the specific form it would take. I knew something was coming. I had known something was coming for 8 months, which is how long I had been building a folder in my attorney's office, and which is a thing I will explain in full, but not yet. Marcus cleared his throat into the microphone. He was 38 years old and handsome in the specific way of someone who has always known they were handsome and has incorporated that knowledge into the operating system of their personality. He smiled at the room the way he smiled at most things, with the ease of someone who has never had a room fail to respond to their smile. Before we get to the dancing, he said, I want to say something. A few things, actually. He looked at his mother. Vivian Hartley was seated at the head family table in the dress she had worn to Marcus's brother's wedding 4 years earlier. I knew this because Marcus's brother's wife Dina had told me, with the specific sisterly warning of someone who wants you to understand the terrain you are entering, and she had the expression of a woman who is about to receive something she believes she is owed. My mother, Marcus said, has sacrificed everything for this family. Everything she has, she gave to us. And I think the most important thing a son can do is make sure that's honored. Polite warmth from the room. I took a sip of sparkling water. So, as of today, Marcus said, I've updated my estate documents. In the event of my death, everything, the property, the accounts, the business interests, goes to my mother, Vivian Hartley. He looked at me, not with apology, with the expression of a man who has made a decision and is informing me of it in a room full of witnesses because he has calculated, correctly, that a room full of witnesses makes it harder to object. 200 people looked from Marcus to me. I looked at my sparkling water. I looked at Vivian, who was doing something I can only describe as glowing. Not with happiness exactly, but with the particular radiance of someone who has won a thing they have been competing for. I looked at my attorney, Renata Flores, who was seated at table 6 with her husband, having been invited to my wedding because she was, at that point, the person I trusted most in the world, and who caught my eye across the room with the specific steadiness of someone who has been told to simply be present and is being present. I set down my sparkling water. I smiled at my husband. I did not say anything because the folder existed and the folder was already enough. My name is Cassandra Webb. I am 34 years old. I am a forensic accountant at a firm in Atlanta, which means I spend my professional life finding the things that numbers are trying not to say. Hidden transfers, misrepresented assets, the specific financial architecture that people build when they have something to conceal and believe they have concealed it. I am very good at finding things. This is relevant. My family is not complicated in the dramatic sense. My mother, Gloria, is 61, a retired high school math teacher who raised me in Decatur, Georgia, with the specific combination of rigor and warmth that produces someone who understands that the world operates on systems, and that systems can be learned and that learning them is not optional. My father is present and steady and has been married to my mother for 36 years and finds the consistency of that neither remarkable nor unremarkable. Simply true, the way certain things are simply true. I was not from a complicated family. I married into one. Marcus Hartley and I met at a professional conference in Charlotte 3 years before we married. He was there representing his family's property management company, Hartley Properties, which managed approximately 40 residential and commercial units across Metro Atlanta, a legitimate and profitable small business built by his father over 20 years. His father had died 2 years before I met Marcus. His mother Vivian had become the nominal head of the company, but Marcus ran the operations. He was charming. He was genuinely charming, which is different from performatively charming, and I want to give him that because accuracy requires it. He was funny and attentive and asked good questions and remembered the answers. He called when he said he would. He showed up when he said he would. For the first year, he was the person he appeared to be. The first sign that something was different came 14 months into our relationship. I should say, the first sign I allowed myself to see. Because I am a forensic accountant, and the things I had half noticed in the preceding 14 months were things that a forensic accountant notices and that a woman in love spends energy explaining away. A transfer I glimpsed on a shared expense account that didn't match the description Marcus gave it. A phone call he took in another room at a volume that was slightly too low. The specific energy his mother brought to rooms that contained both of us. Not hostility, not quite, but the particular territorial quality of a woman who has decided that a space is hers and is noting the presence of someone who has not yet accepted that. 14 months in, I was at Marcus's apartment while he was out of town, watering the plants he had asked me to water. water, and I found a bank statement on his desk. Not his primary account. A secondary account I had not known existed. The statement showed 14 months of deposits, regular, monthly, amounts that ranged between $4,000 and $7,000, and 14 months of transfers out, all to the same destination account. I looked at the destination account number. I went home. I looked up the account number through the professional tools available to someone in my field. The destination account belonged to Vivian Hartley. Marcus had been transferring between $4,000 and $7,000 per month for 14 months to his mother's personal account. I did the arithmetic. Approximately $73,000 over 14 months from an account he had not told me existed. I sat at my own desk for a long time. I was not angry. I want to be precise about that. I felt the specific cold clarity of someone who works in financial investigation and has just found the beginning of a thread. Not the conclusion. You cannot reach conclusions from a single statement, but the beginning of something that needed to be understood before any other decision was made. I called Renata Flores the next morning. Renata had been my attorney for 4 years, not family law, corporate, and financial, and I had called her because she was the person I trusted with financial complexity, and because what I had found was financial complexity before it was anything else. I told her what I had found. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Don't move anything, don't change anything, don't let him know you know, and start keeping records." I started keeping records. I want to be honest about the following 22 months, because they are the most morally complicated period of my life, and I have thought about them more than anything else I have done. I did not immediately end the relationship. I know this will be the part that some people judge. I have judged it myself in certain lights at certain hours. What I did instead was this. I kept my eyes open. I continued the relationship with the full weight of what I had seen on one side of me and the relationship itself on the other, and I tried, with the specific care of someone who understands that evidence must be sufficient before conclusions can be reached, to understand what I was actually looking at. What I found over 22 months was this. The secondary account had been active for 3 years before I discovered it. Total transfers to Vivian Hartley's account in that period, approximately $184,000. The transfers were not disclosed anywhere in Marcus's financial documentation, not to the accountant who prepared his business taxes, not to the bank that held his primary mortgage, not to me. The Hartley Properties business records, which I accessed through the company's shared filing system during a period when Marcus had asked me to help organize some administrative documents. And I want to be clear that I did not access anything I was not given access to. I was given a login and a task, and I completed the task and saw what the task showed me. Indicated that Vivian Hartley was drawing a salary of $8,500 per month as company director, in addition to the transfers from Marcus's personal account. Vivian Hartley was also, per the company records, listed as the sole heir in Marcus's existing will, the will that predated our relationship and that Marcus had never mentioned to me until the evening before our wedding, when he had told me very casually that he had an old will he was going to update eventually. He did not update it before the wedding. He updated it at the wedding. He told me at the wedding, in front of 200 people. I had been building the folder for 8 months by then. Renata had advised me, 8 months before the wedding, when I had brought her the full record of what I had found, to wait. Not because the situation would improve, she did not believe it would improve, but because I was about to marry a man who had concealed $184,000 in transfers to his mother, and the legal position of a wife with evidence was significantly stronger than the legal position of a girlfriend with evidence. "Are you willing to go through with the wedding?" she had asked. I want to be honest about how I answered that question. "Yes," I said, "because the wedding changes what I can do next." Renata looked at me with the expression of someone who has seen many things in 14 years of legal practice and is looking at something she has not seen before. "Okay," she said, "then we wait, and we keep building." We waited. We kept building. The wedding was on a Saturday in September. Everything before 8:22 p.m. was, in its way, real. The ceremony was real. The vows were said in the specific voice of someone who has examined what they are doing from every angle and has chosen it with full information, which is a different thing from saying them in the voice of someone who has been surprised into them. I said my vows to Marcus Hartley knowing exactly who he was. I said them because I needed to be his wife for what came next. At 8:22 p.m., he tapped his glass and told 200 people that his mother was getting everything. At 8:24 p.m., I smiled and said nothing. At 8:26 p.m., Vivian Hartley came to find me near the bar. She arrived with the specific energy of a woman who has just won something and wants to be certain the other person knows it. "I hope you understand," she said, "that Marcus's loyalty to his family is something I've worked very hard to build. That's not going to change because of a wedding." I looked at her. "I understand completely," I said. She looked at me for a moment, searching for the reaction she expected and not finding it, and then she went back to her table. I found Renata at table 6. "Monday," I said. She nodded. Monday, she said. Monday morning. Renata's office, 9 a.m. The folder had been building for 8 months and it was substantial. Renata walked me through it with the methodical precision of someone who has organized evidence many times and understands that the organization is half the work. 4 items. The first, the secondary account records. 3 years of statements, obtained through legal discovery processes that Renata had begun quietly 6 months earlier. Total transfers to Vivian Hartley, $184,000. Undisclosed to any financial institution or tax authority, potentially relevant to multiple legal frameworks. The second, a petition for legal separation filed that morning, citing financial concealment and fraudulent misrepresentation of assets during the period of marriage negotiation. Georgia law has specific provisions regarding asset disclosure in the period leading to marriage. Marcus had not disclosed the secondary account. He had not disclosed the transfers. He had not disclosed Vivian's position as sole beneficiary of a will he had represented to me as outdated. The third, a formal referral to the Georgia Department of Revenue regarding potential unreported financial transfers and their tax treatment, which Renata had prepared with the assistance of a tax attorney colleague and filed the previous Friday. The fourth item. Renata placed it on the desk between us. A single document. A valuation report prepared by an independent business appraiser of Hartley Properties. Current value, $2,340,000. The valuation had been commissioned 6 months earlier. Renata had been building toward this for the entire 8 months, and the business valuation was the final piece, because the business valuation was what made the asset disclosure issue concrete. Marcus had represented Hartley Properties to me during our engagement as a business with some value, his exact words, that he was building towards something more significant. He had not provided documentation. He had not suggested a valuation. He had described it casually enough that some value could mean almost anything. Some value was $2,340,000, and the transfers to Vivian, $184,000 over 3 years, were potentially recoverable as marital assets, depending on how the court characterized the concealment. Renata had a colleague in family law named David Park, 18 years in matrimonial litigation, the specific unhurried precision of someone who has handled complex asset cases many times. David had reviewed the full folder 2 weeks before the wedding. His assessment had been 4 sentences. The concealment is documented. The valuation is defensible. The disclosure failure during engagement is actionable. She has a strong case. I had read those 4 sentences in Renata's office 2 weeks before my wedding, and I had driven home and made dinner and gone to bed, and in the morning I had put on my wedding dress. Marcus called me 11 times on Monday. I answered once at 4 p.m. briefly. Renata Flores has filed documents on my behalf, I said. Please direct further communication to her. Cassandra, what documents? What is happening? Read what was served this morning, I said. Then we can talk through your attorney. I don't have an attorney. You'll need one, I said. I ended the call. Vivian called 3 times. I did not answer. She left 1 voicemail. It was 4 minutes long and covered, in approximately equal portions, the importance of family loyalty, the ways in which I had misunderstood the relationship between Marcus and his mother, the suggestion that what I was doing was a form of cruelty that would haunt me, and, in the final 40 seconds, the specific, quiet fury of a woman who has lost a thing she believed was already hers. I listened to the voicemail once. I saved it to a file in the folder. The legal process took 11 months. David Park managed it with the specific patient precision of someone who understands that family law cases are long, and that length is not failure. Marcus retained an attorney named Graham Cole, competent, experienced, not as prepared as he should have been for the documentation we had, and the 2 sides proceeded through the discovery and negotiation process with the grinding patience that these things require. The concealed account was the central issue. Marcus's position through Graham Cole was that the transfers to his mother were personal financial decisions that predated the marriage and were therefore not subject to marital asset disclosure. David Park's position was that the transfers had continued through the engagement period, that Marcus had represented his financial situation incompletely during that period, and that the legal framework in Georgia regarding material misrepresentation in the lead-up to marriage was clear on the relevant points. The case did not go to trial. It settled in month 11. The settlement covered 3 things. First, a cash payment representing my portion of the marital assets, calculated on the basis of the business valuation and the concealed account balance, plus the recoverable portion of the undisclosed transfers. The total figure was $847,000. Not enormous. Real. Second, a signed acknowledgement by Marcus Hartley that he had failed to fully disclose his financial situation during the engagement period, and that this failure had materially affected the marriage. Third, the referral to the Georgia Department of Revenue remained active and was outside the scope of the settlement, which meant that whatever the Revenue Department determined about the tax treatment of the transfers was a separate matter between Marcus and the state. Graham Cole had argued against the acknowledgement. Marcus had signed it anyway, in the specific manner of someone who has decided that a signed piece of paper is less costly than the alternative. David Park Mark sent me the final settlement documents on a Friday afternoon. I read the acknowledgement twice. Marcus's signature under the truth. That was what I had needed. Not the money, though the money was real and I will not pretend otherwise. The acknowledgement. The signed, witnessed, filed statement that the financial picture Marcus had presented during our engagement had been incomplete. Their version of events, forced to sit down and write its name beneath what was actually true. I have been in therapy since the separation. My therapist is Dr. Michelle Osei, 12 years of practice in relational trauma and what she calls strategic endurance, which is her term for the specific psychological experience of someone who has known something painful for a long time and chosen to stay inside the knowing rather than react to it. She has a question she returns to regularly. What did you learn about yourself in the months between finding the account statement and filing the petition? I have been answering that question for a year. What I have so far, I learned that I am someone who does not react to information before I understand it, that this is a strength and a cost simultaneously, that the months of building the folder were months of living inside a truth that I could not yet do anything with, which is one of the most specific and unglamorous forms of courage there is. I learned that Renata Flores is the person I want in my corner for every difficult thing I ever face. I learned that Vivian Hartley was not the enemy I needed her to be in order for the story to make sense. She was a woman who had raised a son to believe that love was demonstrated through financial priority, and he had believed it so thoroughly that he had built his entire adult financial life around it. That is a failure of something, but it is a human failure, and I hold it at some distance without excusing it. I learned that 200 people watching you receive news that was meant to undo you is a very particular experience, and that the way you respond to it in public, the smile, the stillness, the refusal to give the room the reaction it was set up for, is something you carry forward as evidence of something about yourself. I know who I am now in a way I did not know before Marcus. That is not a gift I will send him a thank you note for, but it is true. Renata and I had lunch last month. A real lunch. Not a meeting, not a briefing, just two people who had been through something significant together, eating good food, and talking about things other than the case. At the end of it, she said, "You should know that David Park told me at the beginning that he had never seen a client come in with documentation that well organized. I'm a forensic accountant," I said. "I know," she said, "but still." I thought about the 8 months of the folder, about the specific patience of building something that could not be used until the right moment, about the Monday morning after the wedding when I had walked into her office and said one word, Monday. She had known. She had been ready. "Thank you," I said, "for waiting with me." She said, "That's what we do." The folder is in a filing cabinet in my home office. Not open, not referenced, just present in the specific way that documented things should be present, not to live inside, but to know exist. The settlement was real. The acknowledgement was real. The work I do now, I moved firms after the settlement to a practice with a stronger family financial fraud division because the 11 months had clarified something about the specific intersection of financial investigation and family law that I wanted to be closer to, is real. Marcus is managing Hartley Properties. Vivienne received nothing from me. She received from the marriage exactly what was always coming to her, which was a son who had organized his financial life around her at the expense of every other relationship in his life, which is a thing that produces a specific kind of loneliness that I believe she is beginning to understand. I don't wish her badly. I don't wish her anything. The folder is in the cabinet. The work is on my desk. The numbers tell the truth if you know how to read them. I know how to read them. I always did.